All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy Presents the NBA Fantasy Baller DFS edition, where we are giving you our favorite plays for tonight, the last day of February, the 28th of 2017. And I'm excited because last night was awful. I think when you're looking at tournament winning scores on FanDuel in the 330, that lets you know everything you need to know about how the night went. There was just a lot of disappointment. A lot of the guys that really were in great position to come through didn't. And I would say at least once a month it happens to that scale where you see scores that would normally net you a mid-range cash take down a tournament. But we're back for another night in daily fantasy. There's about 2 months left here, so we might as well make the best of it. And I actually really like this slate tonight. I've been testing out the projections in the 25-cent tournament on DraftKings. For whatever reason, they just arbitrarily lowered the entry limit to 20 tonight, so I'm going to have to only do 20. Still going to hit the other tournaments like we normally do. Projections, I'm going to do a separate video on projections, not so much how to make projections, because there's actually a pretty good amount of information out there, but it becomes more and more difficult without a data feed coming in to really put together something that is of a high quality. But I just kind of want to talk about how projections are only half of the equation when it comes to trying to put your lineups together. Just because it says Joe Johnson should score 22 fantasy points doesn't mean you should just blindly throw Joe Johnson in your lineups if he's seeing 14 minutes a game and they're playing the Spurs. So there has to be a little more done. We'll get into that later. All we want to do right now is give you 3 picks, 3 of our favorite top dollar plays, YouTube exclusive, 3 of our favorite value tier plays. The top tier plays have been working out pretty well. Karl Anthony Towns was a monster last night, came through with a nice big outing. Tonight, that guy for me, and it's not even close, is going to be Jimmy Butler. I think there can be a lot of argument with Russell Westbrook. His price has dropped somewhat across the industry because he's playing the Utah Jazz. That is a team that he has struggled with in the past. Granted, the last time that he played, he put up between 75 and 80 fantasy points, depending on the site you're playing on. While I don't think he's a bad play tonight, I'm not expecting another 70-point game out of him. Instead, I'll look at Jimmy Butler, who's been very stable relative to his price as of late. Brings you a pretty significant cost savings to Russell Westbrook. And while he doesn't have that 70 to 80-point upside that Westbrook brings to the table, he has a friendly matchup against the Nuggets on his home court. It's going to be a fast-paced matchup, and I think at 17-3 on Fantasy Draft, 9,300 on FanDuel and DraftKings, I'm expecting him to breach the 50-point mark with upside into the 60s if he really gets rolling and he's assisting, getting steals, getting blocks. So he's my top dollar play of the night. From there, I'm going to go with Marc Gasol of the Memphis Grizzlies going up against a Phoenix front court that has decided it's going to undergo a youth movement. Tyson Chandler has played 0 minutes over the last 2 games. That leaves Gasol against the likes of Allen Williams, Alex Len, Marquise Chris. I think these guys all have really good potential for the future, but not against Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol at 1,400 on Fantasy Draft, 8,200 on FanDuel, and come on, guys, 7,600 on DraftKings. Gasol is a pretty good bet to be a double-double tonight. At 7,600, that's 2 free points that you're starting out with. His upside in a game like this really has to be over the 50-point mark. And I think his floor is probably near the 40-point mark. It could be 35, but are you really kicking yourself if you play Marc Gasol at 7,600 and he returns 35 points? No, because the reality is probably not a very good chance that that's what he's going to return, and he gives you just that high ceiling that you look for, especially what I look for in my cash game plays. I want a guy, stable floor, but a really high ceiling in case everything goes well. Next up, I will look to Frank Kaminsky of the Charlotte Hornets, 1,300 fantasy draft, 5,900 on FanDuel, 6,900 on DraftKings. I think this is more of a FanDuel play. I'm not saying I don't like to play on the other sites because you get the 3-point bonus on Fantasy Draft and DraftKings. You have a potential for a double-double, which nets you 2 points on each site. The turnovers are half. So I definitely can see Kaminsky having 36 to 38 fantasy points against the Lakers team that started off the year making people say, okay, this might work out, and we're sitting here now saying, okay, this is the same Lakers team we've known for the past couple of years. And that's really what I'm banking on here. I'm banking on the Lakers really struggling, and I think Frank Kaminsky, who's just been on fire, he didn't have a great game last time because he dealt with some foul trouble, as did Jusuf Nurkic. So it was something that was just going around in that game, I guess you can say. But I think tonight we will definitely want to go back to the Frank Kaminsky well. I'm sorry, that was against the Clippers. I don't know why I thought it was against Portland. Anyway, that's our 3 core plays for this evening. Now let's transition over to our 3 value plays. I'm going to kind of go a little bit away from where I think some people might go because I don't think people love to play Memphis. This is going to be one of those nights that people do play Memphis because it's an up-paced contest. So you get a few more possessions, and if guys like Conley and Gasol are able to put together strong fantasy performances with low possessions, imagine what they can do if they get 6 more possessions in total in the game. But I'm going to go to the Phoenix side of the game, and I like Alex Len, 7,800 on Fantasy Draft, 4,800 on FanDuel, that $4,000 mark on DraftKings. He's not a highly consistent player. I could absolutely see him getting in foul trouble with Marc Gasol tonight, no doubt about that. But I think he can also come through. I wouldn't be shocked to see him rack up 20 fantasy points, 25 fantasy points. That's what you're looking for at his price, and I think that makes him firmly on my radar tonight. Next up, we'll go back to Chicagoland. Who do they got? They have Paul Zipser, who's not going to play. He's out with an ankle injury. Bobby Portis is ineffective. They don't like playing him. It's Fred Hoiberg just does not seem to like to trust Portis with more than 20 minutes. So here we have Nikola Mirotic, 9,800 on Fantasy Draft, 4,400 on FanDuel, 5,000 on DraftKings. There's no reason to not play this guy, honestly. He's hitting his shots. He's back in the rotation. Maybe it's because they feel like they don't have a choice, but I think that he's good for about 30 minutes. I'm putting his floor at around 25 fantasy points tonight. And this is a guy in some situations that could quite possibly end up over 40 points. It could eat away a little bit at Jimmy Butler. My fingers are crossed that it eats away at Dwayne Wade's total more than it does Jimmy Butler, but he's got to be a guy you're considering against the Nuggets tonight. Last up, we're going to go back to that Charlotte-LA game, and I'm going to throw out a guy who's definitely risky, but I think that the team is going to make a commitment to using some of these younger guys. We've seen them do it already with Brandon Ingram. I think we're going to start to see more of Ivica Zubac. 7,100 on DraftKings, 3,600 on both FanDuel and DraftKings, 7,100 on Fantasy Draft. I don't know if I said that right. Anyway, dirt cheap, needs less than about 20 points on Fantasy Draft to make sense, needs under 20 points on FanDuel and DraftKings. This is a guy who can come in and be a point-per-minute monster. I'm not convinced that Charlotte is going to be able to really deal with centers with Frank Kaminsky. I think he's got an interesting skill set, but he's not a guy that I look at, and we just saw DeAndre Jordan and granted it went to overtime, but he just put a monster line on the Hornets. So I think Ivica Zubac, if given the time tonight, which it looks like he will, should be able to produce good results for your fantasy teams. That's all for today. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Subscribe to our NBA newsletter. Go over to Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And make sure to join us tomorrow for more daily fantasy advice.